Joining us on The Informer is renowned humanitarian Moira Kelly. Welcome, Moira. How are you?
Oh, very good. Good morning. Lovely to be here, George. Thank you.
The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Mahatma Gandhi said that years ago, and it's your favourite quote. Tell me about it.
Yeah, that's one of my top three, and another one is Mother Teresa's. But I think it's when we talk about human beings and service to others. I think Mahatma Gandhi sort of emphasised everything we do in life when it comes to helping others. So he's certainly one of those wonderful mentors alongside Mother Teresa. She had some great quotes too. Little things in great ways she always had too. So I love that as well.
Oh,
and
yes.
and our wonderful patron saint Mary MacKillop as well. She had some great quotes. So I'm a great quote person.
You know, those three names that you mentioned were all small people with big hearts and big ideas. You've been caring for sick and needy children and families for much of your adult life. Has it given you much joy? Because I can imagine there would have been enormous sadness in between.
Yeah, look, George, I couldn't imagine. It's funny how you end up in life, what you're doing, but I always knew as a young child that I'd always work with kids. And I look back on my life and I think how lucky and fortunate I am, but I couldn't imagine doing anything else with my life. And so I feel very privileged. But I grew up in Melbourne and Carlton. There was a St. George's school there. And opposite there was the St. Nicholas home for people with disabilities. And, you know, as a young child, I was so taken by the kids getting on off their buses, and people knew where to find me at lunchtime or morning tea, munching on a wagon wheel, watching the kids get on off their buses. And I think as a young child, I had the instinct. I really wanted to work with those children one day. So I think that's where the seed was planted.
The wagon wheel I remember very fondly in my lunch times at school. You bring back memories. Now, you've been caring, as I said, for needy children for a lifetime. You've managed to bring some tremendous support to children with serious health problems. You've managed to get them from overseas, and you've understood that their local medical facilities couldn't meet their needs, and you've brought them down under. You launched the Moira Kelly Creating Hope Foundation, was it 4 years ago now? What's that journey been like, managing to set that up and allow it to do the work that it does even to this day?
Well, when I was living in Eastern Europe I was living there for about 11 years, and I spent 4.5 years in Bosnia during the war, and it was there that people kept coming with sick children. And I don't know, I always thought that to take a little person from one country to another, you know, it was like something that movie was made of. You know, you just saw these wonderful movies as we grew up. But I always thought you had to have three special qualities. You had to be someone who was very special, someone with lots of experience, or someone with lots of money. And I knew I didn't fit into any of those categories. But sometimes you're in a situation where if you don't think, sometimes you get into a situation, if you don't think too much about things in life, you just get on with it. So you just started making phone calls to some people in America and some friends in Ireland to raise money for airfares. And I got the Boston hospitals on board, and I took first a bunch of kids to Massachusetts. And then a year later, I arrived with I think about 16 of us all going to Boston as well, galvanized all the hospitals. And I suppose that's where it all started, was Bosnia. But I remember a physician, as I was walking out with a little baby who had been injured with shrapnel to the skull, and he said, "So, Moira, you're an Aussie?" I said, "I am." "You live in Bosnia? Are your family Bosnian?" I said, "Oh, no, they're Irish and Australian." I said, "Oh, so are you working with my colleagues down under?" And I said, with a glimmer in my eye, I said, "Well, to make a long story short, I'm on my way there after here to try and bring two of my first kids to Australia who've been injured in Bosnia, to see how my own people would accept that." So really, I picked up the passports of these kids in Rome and took these two boys who'd lost a father and a leg in the war. And the Salvation Army at the time, the Bethesda Hospital, embraced us and gave us the beds. And then I sort of got onto other hospitals while I was here, and that's where it all opened up the door here to Australia. But so I had an organisation called Nobody's Children in Bosnia, and I had a couple of refugee camps, and then I came and set up an organisation called Children First. I was with them for 10 years, and then I stood back from them after the twins were here. And then years later, I set up the Moira Kelly Creating Hope Foundation, because I have children who have surgery, but I also have taken on women who are at risk. So I have women in my home now who have been trafficked here, and women who have been domestic violence. And I don't know, maybe because I spent a couple of years in the Bronx looking after women like that, I just really want to bring it back here. And in my house, I mean, it's very multicultural. It's a bit like I often say the immigration should come and raid the place, really. But not really, we're all legal. But I look at my kids. I look at my kids and I look at the women, and there's a wonderful sense of, and then they see kids who have got these horrific illnesses and they think, it just balances them up a little bit. They become carers for them as well. So, yeah, so setting up the foundation, the last one was a big decision because I didn't want to have an organisation again. I just want to do it. But organisations are there to keep us honest. So the reason I haven't put the word children in this one, creating hope, is that you could have women and kids. So, yeah, so I've just loved it. So we've got 2 places here in Melbourne at the moment now. And, yeah, we're very United Nations, put that way.
Moira Kelly, listening to you tell your story, you seamlessly go from one part of the world to the other. You make it sound so simple. But, you know, those organisations and those cities that you've travelled in, they're all pretty tough cities that demand something special. You must be a very, very good businesswoman to be able to manage to turn some of those very hard-nosed hospitals into giving you the sort of support and providing you with the sort of opportunities that you've managed to provide for all those children in need and those families that you talk about. I think there's much, much more to you than you pass on. Where does that
I had a good friend in Ireland who went to,
where does that come from, Moira? Where does that drive and that commitment come from?
well, I think my dad's an Irishman, so don't hold that against his character. So I think my dad, with his sense of humour and I think the Irish spirit, and I think they've got I think the Irish people are inbred, those who have lost the most give the most. And I think that comes back to the origins of Irish people. So they've got a sense of service. And that's always been something about the Irish being famous for. But I think my mother, she's a Barry here in Melbourne, and her father was actually the leader of the DLP. He was Bill Barry, and he was the Minister of Health here. And he was that's when politics was into social justice those days. I think, you know, and where it's I think the ideals are social justice now, but I think sometimes we get just a bit mixed up on the way. But so I think, but I have no interest in politics whatsoever. But I know that maybe I don't think that any of us can ever sit back in our life and think our parents haven't had a big impact on us for our values and the decisions we've made in our life. But I do think, yeah, you have experiences in life and you hear things. And I suppose probably the best way to explain this was, you know, you hear about a story or a war going on somewhere, and I would go, oh God, I'd love to go there. I realise that most people aren't like that, but my mum used to I heard her say someone one day, I just hope that Moira doesn't hear about this, because if she hears that, she'll want to go there. So some disaster in some world, but you know, yeah, I just feel I'm very lucky, and I just feel as if, look, the best way to explain it is look at the Bosnian War. I was alive for that, and I wasn't here for the Holocaust what happened in Germany, but I was alive for this. So I'd like to think in years' time the Bosnians come back and think, wow, you know, during the worst time of our lives that we went through, the Bosnians, Croatians and Serbs, you know, where was I? I was alive at that time. I could do something about this. They won't remember Moira Kelly, but they'll know that Australia and Australians did something. And for my own self, I'd like to think that I played a part in making a difference. Rather, I couldn't do anything for Holocaust. I mean, all of us look at that and we can't even look at movies. It's so harrowing because we feel helpless. But I was there for Bosnia. So I'd like to think that we can always be active, and just because we're Australian doesn't mean it's not our problem.
Something also that you don't readily accept is the word no. Very small word. You just don't. You don't believe it. You don't believe there's a reason to use it. So you find ways to make yes the key driver for so much of the work that you do. How do we help Moira Kelly do more of what she does? Is there a charity? Is there a donation line? Is there something that people who also share your values can come on board and help you do so much more for those children and those women who have gone through terrible, terrible things and need and deserve a better future?
Well, it's so easy for us to do say no to things because it makes us a conscience clear and look, I'm not able to help, but there's always something you can do. I figure, you know, like all the kids over the years that I worked overseas with, that go into Ireland or Australia or Europe for surgery, wherever I took them, America, it's always a doctor's decision whether it was an operable or not. So the day that you start playing God or start saying no with other people's lives is the day that you shouldn't do this work anymore. So I can never do this on my own. You always need other people who can make this possible, like whether it's a Lions Club or Rotary Club or variety who have helped pay for an airfare or things like this. So, you know, there's people in the world out there that need people like us. And some people say not everyone could do what I could do. But I couldn't do what I do without people supporting what I do as well. So, so certainly, with our women, we got a house from the Catholic Archdiocese of Melbourne, and we're hoping to get another one next year for women and children. And the children I bring in from overseas for surgery, they stay with us, and we try and get the private hospitals on board. And sometimes they'll have to go to the Children's Hospital, which is a government we have to pay for. So sometimes we're just looking. Look, we're not a big charity. I don't want to be that big. You know, little things in great ways, as Mother Teresa said. But sometimes in the midst of all the pandemic as well, people forgetting about little charities are doing great work. So I know that, like myself and others, have really suffered, but we're not up there with the big league, and I never want to be. But I know that there's little, like some of the great sponsors we get, pensioners putting in $5 a month, and that all adds up, and it's just little things like that, you know. So there's always something someone can do. Sometimes it's people dropping off clothes, or, you know, offering their expertise like allied health. So, you know, there's always ways of helping. I'm always telling people at high schools and kids, you know, when you finish year 12, don't think that your teachers and your families have brought you just this far for you to go get the best car and go on the best holiday and have a nice house. No matter what profession you are, you don't have to be a nurse and a doctor and a teacher to give back. Even a hairdresser could offer to do things for elderly people, or the bank teller can let a carer walk in the front row and sit her down on the chair and help her out, give a bit of individual kindness. So there's always ways to give back. Don't leave it for someone else. There's not always putting your hands in your pocket.
Moira Kelly, as long as there is a Moira Kelly in the world will be in a better place. We thank you for your time and for joining us on The Informer and giving us a sense of what drives you and what has made your journey so special. And let me tell you, I'm sure that when the stories about the war in the Balkans and the time in Bosnia, it will be remembered. And for those of you and for those who did know you there, I'm sure they remember that time most fondly. Moira Kelly, thank you for joining us.
Good on you. Good on you. God bless, and thanks very much for having. Keep up the good fight.
Thank you.